bear arms, and I could need a rocket launcher for keeping my well-regulated militia. But Congress can say, well, no, that is actually not within the confines of the Second Amendment. Presidential acts, things the presidential does. Customs and political parties. This is pretty much just over time, certain things that we do when we get to and when we look at the State of the Union. There's a lot of stuff that happens all the time in the State of the Union that is just custom and tradition. There's nothing in the Constitution that actually says certain things need to happen the way that they happen in the State of the Union. But they do now. And if you go against that, it's just like, why are you changing it? So, customs, political parties, presidential acts, laws, and the best, not necessarily the best, but the easiest way that informally the Constitution is changed is a Supreme Court decision. You can think also of Brown versus Board of Education. Separate is not equal. Just how education has changed over the years. The Bill of Rights. Now, we got a lot. We're going to cover 10 amendments in this unit. The first 10 amendments were released in 1791, a couple years after the Constitution is going to be written, designed to protect people and states from too much national government power. Okay? So the Constitution is written, and the states are going to be the one to call it out. Like, we need a few more things. We need guarantees of protection. So they're going to pass these amendments so that you have certain rights that are protected. States have certain rights. Federal government has rights. Individuals have rights. So the First Amendment, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, meaning that they cannot just go take one specific religion and make it state mandated. So, even though a lot of people consider the United States a quote-unquote Christian nation, it's not officially because there's no state religion. Or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. That is where we get the freedom of religion. You do not have to be a certain religion to live in this country. A lot of other countries do not have that. Or abridging the freedom of speech. We get our freedom of speech. Freedom of the press. The right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government. These are our 5 main freedoms in the First Amendment. Freedom of religion, of speech, of the press, peaceably assembly, and petition the government. Now, there are some certain intricacies within all of these. So, freedom of speech, for example. I'm just really going to talk about this right now. But you do not have the freedom of speech to go into a movie theater, for example, and yell bomb or fire when there is not an actual bomb or fire. You are causing a disruptance of the peace upon the people. So, that's an easy way to maybe think of it, is you have the freedom to do X, Y, and Z as long as it is not disturbing the peace. Okay? If you go into a place and yell fire or bomb or something, when there is not, you are unnecessarily disrupting the peace, and you can be fined or maybe thrown in jail for a couple of days, depending on the state. All right. Second Amendment, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Talk about probably the most controversial amendment that we're going to look at. What does it mean? Does a well-regulated militia, is that covered technically today by the National Guard? Or is it not, because the National Guard falls under the Department of Defense, federal level, all of that. The right of the people to keep and bear arms. Does this mean that it was for muskets? Does it mean you can have whatever? Does it mean that you should be able to have whatever the government military has so that the people can rise up and respond to an authoritarian takeover, which means do they need to be able to own tanks and rocket launchers and fighter jets? Or does it just mean hunting weapons, guns for fun, trap shooting, different things? There is a lot of varying opinion and a lot of different opinions, different ideas about the Second Amendment. It's probably going to continue to be debated for a long time, and we'll talk about it in class. Third Amendment. No soldier shall in time of peace be quartered in any house. This doesn't really apply today. All of our bases have a lot of housing, but back in the day, when a army would move into a city for whatever reason, usually there's not going to be a base there, and there's not going to be a Holiday Inn Express. So they would force them to go into homes, and the owner would have to take care of them. So now the owner must consent to have military people stay in the home. So this doesn't really apply necessarily today, because obviously we have bases, we have hotels, it's not as big of a deal. So Third Amendment we almost never talk about. Amendment number 4, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures. This is another, slightly vague, but not vague thing, okay? Shall not be violated, no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched. This is the reason, if you watch a police show, they say, we got to get a warrant to go into this house or do something, okay? It is because of the Fourth Amendment. You have to have probable cause, and you are not allowed to be searched unreasonably. Now, what does unreasonable mean? That is another thing that, depending on the situation, for example, you're driving down the road and you're doing, you're slightly swerving all over the place. The police officer pulls you over. If you were swerving, trying to not, there's a lot of complicated laws around driving violations and a whole lot of stuff. And I, by no means, am an expert in it. I have some friends who are former police officers, so I'm trying to pull in what I know. But they can then have probable cause or reason, so they don't have unreason, to then be able to search. And then, but also think about this. So, vehicles then get added. Fourth Amendment is pretty clear. Persons, houses, papers, effects. Then you have vehicles that get added in the 20th century, in the 1900s. How do vehicles now pertain? Are they a part of your person? Are they a part of your house? Do you need a warrant? All this stuff. As technology happens, usually things will then go up to the Supreme Court because somebody appeals it in some way, shape, or form. So, your first 4 amendments. Now let's move on. Amendment number 5. No person shall be held to answer for a capital, otherwise infamous crime, blah, 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 blah. It's a lot of stuff. Essentially, the easiest way to remember it is if you've heard in a TV show, movie, anything like that, I plead the 5th. What they're saying is I plead the 5th Amendment. I do not have to self-incriminate myself. I do not have to say things that might be incriminating to me, or maybe my posterity. So, the 5th Amendment, I plead the 5th. I feel like any movie or TV show, they always try to work that in there. Alright, now, we're going to the 6th. 6th Amendment. In all criminal prosecutions, all accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy public trial. Now, what does speedy mean? Does that mean within 2 weeks? Within 2 months? Within 2 years? This is, again, something that has been debated, and some lawyers have used this in an appeals process. Like, look, he is not getting his 4th Amendment right. He's not getting a speedy trial. And for sure that has happened. And then you have to look at, well, is the court system backed up? Why is it backed up? There's a lot of layers to all of this stuff. And some of this stuff is kind of vague. They didn't say the definition of a speedy trial. So we now have to interpret what that means today in today's events and culture, what does a speedy trial mean? And hopefully, states and the government can all agree on stuff, but they don't always. An impartial jury of your peers in the district when the crime shall have been committed. So if you committed a crime in Omaha, you're not going to go in front of a jury in California because it's not the same people. Different understandings, just a whole bunch of different stuff. You have the right to be confronted with the witness against them. You have the right to face your accuser, is what that's saying. You can't just be charged without being known. Now, again, think back to, there was just a Revolutionary War. The British, sometimes these people were getting charged with all of this ridiculous stuff. And like, hey, well, who's accusing me of doing this? I've been in jail for 2 years now and a trial hasn't happened. I want to be in front of a jury. All of these are put into place to protect us, the people. Okay? Amendment 7, in suits at common law. So, you have public trials and suits at common law, where the value in controversy shall exceed $20. So think of the Sixth Amendment as criminal going up against the state, federal. You have the right to a speedy trial. And common suits is going to be going against each other. Eighth Amendment, another one. Excessive bail shall not be required. What does excessive bail mean? What is excessive? If you don't know, bail, if you're going or you're waiting on your trial or something like that, the judge might say you have a bail of $10,000, meaning you're in jail waiting for your trial unless you can pay bail, in which case you can get out. Now, if you've, again, watched a movie or a TV show with people, and a judge might say no bail, because this person, maybe they're dangerous, they're afraid that they're going to flee the country, because it's a time where you're not in jail yet, but you haven't had your trial yet, because you're innocent until proven guilty. But it's a dangerous subject, so they're not even going to allow them to have bail because they don't want them to leave. Nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment. Eighth Amendment, excessive bail, no excessive fines, and cruel and unusual punishment. 200 years ago, hanging was not considered cruel and unusual. Today, hanging as a form of execution, a legal form of execution, is considered cruel and unusual, which is why the death penalty has changed a lot, because there have been a lot of cases where they're looking at the Eighth Amendment and saying, is the death penalty or the way that they are imposing the death penalty cruel and unusual? That is going against your Eighth Amendment right. But there's still some interpretiveness to this. Now, an excessive bail. If a millionaire, let's say, goes to jail, and their bail is $100,000, for a millionaire, that might not be that much. If you only make $40,000 a year, and your bail is $100,000, that is excessive to you, but not to a millionaire. So, the judge usually, and should, they look at the circumstances to determine what an excessive bail would be, depending on the crime, depending on the person, all of that. Ninth Amendment. The enumeration of the Constitution of certain rights shall not be construed to deny or disparage others retained by the people. What does that mean? It pretty much just means anything not mentioned in the government is for the people or retained by the people. Any right not specified that you can't do, this is kind of a catch-all. Just because the Constitution doesn't say that you can do it or say that you can't do it, doesn't mean that you can't.